This episode is brought to you by Hasa. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the Bottom Feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about black algae. I'm going to answer some of the questions concerning spreading black algae from pool to pool. Is this possible? And should you be worried about using your pool equipment in one pool that has black algae and possibly spreading it to another pool? Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support. For me, I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. And I remember distinctly when I first saw my first black algae. This was when I was working back, I believe it was in 1989, 1990, right around there. I was working in a pool in Ontario, California, and this pool had a sand filter, which wasn't typical of the area. I remember that distinctly. But I also remember that this is where I first saw the black algae on the plaster in the pool. The sand filters just kind of triggered my memory because they're pretty rare here. And I remember the black algae, and I remember treating it, brushing it, and nothing happening to it. There was really not a lot of literature on what to do with it. And the person I was working for back then said, oh, just put some, chlorine on top of it and that should kill it. You've seen it before or whatever. So I did put some chlorine on top. We used to get the tablets in these giant drums, and there was a lot of the trichlor dust still on the bottom. So I took some of this and I sprinkled it, spread it on the pool. And luckily it was a white plaster pool, by the way, because there was no cautions or kind of explanations or any kind of training. He just said, put some of this powder on it, it'll kill it. And it did take care of it. And that was the first instance of black algae. And I think there hasn't been a lot of knowledge since Rudy Stinkowitz wrote his book on algae, where he really talks about black algae in detail, and that actually black algae is not even an algae. It's actually a cyanobacteria. And it looks like algae, of course, because it forms on the surface, and we kind of think that it's just like green algae or yellow algae, but it's actually more aggressive, and the roots go really deep into the pool. That's why you hear these stories of like someone who had black algae, they replastered their pool, and the black algae was still there. Now, I don't know how far you can believe that. It could be true, but it could just be that the spores were still in the area. Now, how does the black algae get into the pool? Well, it's interesting because the theory about it getting in from like the beach on a bathing suit is not too far from the truth if you analyze, where the black algae comes from. So yes, oceans, wherever the cyanobacteria spores exist in nature, they can attach anything wet, believe it or not, like a wet bathing suit or a wet t-shirt or a pool brush or a leaf rake that stays wet for a little bit of time. It survives on there for quite a long time. I think up to weeks it can survive on there, the spores of the black algae. So it's not really a stretch or a urban legend that black algae maybe originated from the ocean and got on someone's bathing suit that used it in the ocean in the pool, because truthfully, you're not going to use different bathing suits in the ocean or lake in a pool. And it could have gotten into the first pool that way. I was recently in Iceland on a vacation, and they don't have mosquitoes there, but one of the persons living there had told me that they actually had their first sign of mosquitoes recently in one city. And so maybe mosquitoes are invading Iceland in the future. But it would be nice to have a place where there were no mosquitoes, I guess. But it's one of those things where eventually something's going to happen and something's going to invade the area. So black algae, I think I was pretty close to when it was hitting California back in the early 90s is when we first started seeing the black algae. Prior to that, I don't think it was extremely prevalent. And I think a lot of that has to do with maybe knowledge and kind of recognizing what it is. Maybe no one reported that as much. But I would say that yes, like a towel or anything you're using at the beach and using your pool. Let's say you have a brand new pool built and you want to prevent black algae from ever growing in that pool. I would highly recommend that if you go to the ocean, that the kids don't use the same bathing suits for the pool. Kind of keep everything separate. And if you do see black algae at all in your service accounts, you want to attack it pretty aggressively. So I mentioned the trichlor powder that was at the bottom of the tablet buckets that we would use. HASA makes something called Algae, which is a granular trichlor. I find it highly effective against black algae, not only because it raises the chlorine level to like 100 parts per million, but the black algae is really hard to kill. There's like a coating on top. If you ever treated a pool with black algae, you know what I'm talking about. You would take like a 5-inch or 6-inch stainless steel brush and try to brush the heads off, and it would be kind of like a light brown color once you brush the head off, and then the chlorine will actually have much more effect in killing it. You just can't superchlorinate the pool without brushing it. In most cases, that's not going to have the same kind of effect or the killing factor, the killing power on the black algae itself. So I would definitely recommend brushing the heads off and the superchlorinating. If you're uncomfortable using the granular trichlor, then you would just superchlorinate the pool. You can also use a copper algicide. The Polarex Plus is very effective against black algae as well. It does take some time for it to actually kill it. Copper is known to kill the bacteria or the cyanobacteria, so copper is good and it is effective against it. But I think the most effective treatment does require superchlorination, the use of copper, and maybe some granular trichlor used correctly if you sprinkle it on lightly. You can also use, I found what would be an effective alternative to this, and if you have cal hypo tablets, you can actually break these up into chunks, maybe not as small as the granular trichlor, and these will also sit on top of the black algae and kill it as well. Anything that's topical that can sit on top of it, and cal hypo, by the way, won't burn. And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. Pool plaster, like the trichlor granular, may, if you don't put it on correctly. So grinding up some cal hypo tablets or breaking with a rubber mallet in a plastic bag may be as effective as the granular trichlor that you're using out there. I found that using the trichlor, the cal hypo tablets, I should say, is a great alternative because they dissolve slowly in the water and they'll sit on top of the black algae heads as well. Since I mentioned that the first outbreak of black algae probably came from someone swimming in the ocean that had the black algae on their bathing suit, then how was it transferred to, several pools across the area? And then, of course, it's found in a lot of pools now across the area. Well, I think a lot of it is cross-contamination with your pool cleaning tools. I mentioned that if the surface is damp and a pool brush or pool leaf rake coming from one account to another is going to be pretty damp still with the water on it from the pool, there's a possibility that the black algae spores are on the pool brush or on the pool net, and it could be transferred from one pool to another pretty easily. Now, there's a few factors involved in transferring the black algae. I think a lot of it has to do with the chlorine level in the pool itself. If the free chlorine level is low, like 1 part per million or less, and you're going from one pool to another, you're going from one pool of black algae into a pool that has a really low chlorine level, the chances of you transferring the black algae are greater than if that pool had, 5 parts per million of chlorine in it and it was fine as far as the sanitizer level. So low chlorine is a contributing factor to the spread of black algae. If you ever treated a pool with black algae and then the chlorine zeroed out the following week, there's a good chance that the black algae has come back with a vengeance because, again, chlorine is somewhat effective in killing or keeping the black algae from spreading and increasing. And if you're transferring your skimmer, leaf rake, and brush into a pool that has very low chlorine, there's a good chance that the black algae from one pool can enter another, and you could have several black algae pools on your route after that. So I recommend that if you have a pool of black algae, use a dedicated leaf rake and a dedicated brush. I wouldn't worry too much about the pole. The pole is going to dry out between stops pretty rapidly, and I think the spores are probably looking for more of a cloth-like material, like a riptide bag would be very risky. If you're using the riptide in a pool with black algae and take it to another pool and use it, chances are the bag is going to have spores in it, release them into the water, and if that chlorine level is low in that pool, black algae can spread very rapidly. Will it stay on your pool vacuum head? Again, it may dry out before you get to the next stop. There could be some black algae on the wheels. The pool hose, possibly there might be some spores on there. I find that leaf rakes, of course, and nets are the leaf rakes, nets, and brushes are probably the biggest contributor to black algae in one pool to another. So you definitely, again, want to take precautions with your equipment, and you don't want to spread the black algae from pool to pool or try to prevent it as much as possible from spreading. So of course, if you're using a 6-inch stainless steel brush in the pool to break the heads off the black algae, I can almost guarantee you that brush is extremely contaminated with black algae. It's going to have some of the residue of the heads on there, and there's no question that you're going to spread the black algae from pool to pool using your stainless steel brush. So of course, have a dedicated 6-inch stainless steel brush. It makes no sense to not use the same leaf rake and brush, but then you're using a stainless steel brush in the pool. That definitely needs to be something that you leave at that site and use that stainless steel brush only on that pool, because that will spread the black algae pretty fast. Now, if you are treating it again, you have to brush the heads. That's kind of mandatory to treating black algae. If you don't brush the heads off, the chemical won't penetrate. I don't think the copper will penetrate as easily as well with the heads on the black algae. So you want to brush them off. Sometimes it's a real pain and it is black algae all over the place. And so this may take like half an hour sometimes. Believe me, I've done this where I spent half an hour brushing black algae in 90-degree weather on a pool surface. So there is a lot of manual labor. Of course, you're going to charge for the black algae treatment because you can't do this at no charge. You're brushing the pool, treating it, raising the chlorine level, and spending extra time there. So you want to make sure that the free chlorine level is at least 30 parts per million or higher. I found that if it's any less than that, the black algae is not killed or destroyed properly. So I always raise the pools at 50 parts per million and keep it at that level for a few days so that the chlorine really has a chance to kill it. You'll be amazed if you use the granular trichlor, the Algae, and you have a pool that has like a really big outbreak of black algae. If you were to sprinkle that and broadcast it on the pool surface, and you go back there the next week and the black algae is pretty much gone. Of course, the automatic cleaner should be turned off for that period of time so that it doesn't pick up the chlorine. So turn off the automatic cleaner. And I wouldn't say the pool needs to necessarily be off, but when you're broadcasting the algae in the pool should be off so that it settles without being blown around. But then the pool could probably run a few hours after that. If you're superchlorinating the pool, not using the granular trichlor, you definitely want to run the pool 24/7 to kind of get the most circulation, to ensure that the spores are enter into the filter. You can clean the filter out and get rid of that. And of course, one of the things that you want to make sure is that no one goes in the pool while the pool's at 50 parts per million. That's one thing. And you want to make sure that no one's in there and that the pool doesn't get turned off during the process. Sometimes homeowner will be like, hey, the pool's running at 11 o'clock at night. Let me turn it off. That could short circuit it, and you want to make sure it's circulating as long as possible with the high chlorine level. And you want to keep it at 50 parts per million the best you can during the whole week period. a few days during the week at least. It can drop down to like 30 after that. But you definitely want to super chlorinate it. And then after the fact, the chlorine can really never zero out after the pool has had black algae. I've seen this happen where the pool is perfectly cleared of it, and even a year goes by, but then they have a pool party and the pool goes to zero. And sure enough, the little pinhole black algae starts to develop again in the pool. There's these trees that are out here in the area that will just kind of sprout out and grow everywhere. And you'll cut it down. You'll even cut it down to where there's a stump, and then the tree will start growing right back out of the stump if it gets a little bit of moisture in there, even if you poison it. It's a really aggressive tree, and it's really like a plague in my area. It's all over the place, and kind of black algae is very similar, that if the chlorine does zero out for any period of time, the heads could redevelop, because the roots are probably still under the plaster. They go pretty deep. And if the chlorine level is always, 5 parts per million, all through the summer, you don't have much to worry about. But if it does zero out, then you have a little bit of a problem. And so one way to ensure that the black algae will be eliminated is to, of course, put copper in the water to a safe level. The safest way to introduce copper, in my opinion, is with the pool RX, because it's chelated, it's not going to fall out of solution and stain the pool. You can use the copper aldoside every week, but you got to be careful you don't overdose the pool with the copper, because if you put too much copper in there, it could cause staining in the pool. So definitely copper is a great thing to have in your pool going forward after black algae, and it also helps treat it again. It just takes a long time for it to actually kill it and destroy it, and you have to make sure that you brush the heads off the black algae. So I guess to summarize, if you are doing pool service and you notice the account has black algae, I would not reuse the same Riptide bag, the same brush, the same net in the pool, because you can spread the black algae from one account to another if the conditions are correct in that pool to allow the black algae to form and grow. And to prevent that, just keep separate equipment at the pool with black algae. And even after you cure the black algae, I kind of would be reluctant to still use the same brush and net, unless you know for sure, like months have passed, that there's no black algae in there. And it's, again, something that can come back at any time if the chlorine level drops down. So better not to have black algae, because treating it and preventing it in the future is a real pain. And the best thing to do is not to cross-contaminate your pools with your pool equipment. If you're looking for other podcasts, you can find those on my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. Click on the podcast icon on the banner. There'll be a drop-down menu of over 1,900 podcasts for you there. And if you're interested in the coaching program that I offer, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great rest of your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.